After all the work to get this wall ready and to get the layout on the hold downs and get everything taken care of, the actual grouting is almost anticlimactic. It's kind of a victory lap. It goes kind of slow, there's time to visit. All you're doing is pumping it full, just a little bit proud of full, and rodding it down and striking it off and making sure it's completely full. It's pretty nice. The only really technical aspect of this was a mix design, because it needs to be very fluid. It needs to be runny, because you want to fill every crevice and you want it to run through the bond beams, and you just want it to go everywhere. And in order to make concrete runny, high slump, like an 8 or a 9-inch slump, without adding a whole bunch of water and weakening it, I'm using a super plasticizer. So at the batch plant, I instructed them to take it from about a 3 or a 4-inch slump up to an 8 or a 9-inch slump with plasticizer. I also instructed them to put Delvo on board. Now Delvo, I think, is a proprietary name or one particular manufacturer for a retarder. That is, it slows down the set because we're pumping this into hot, warm blocks that are thirsty and dry, and it's going to tend to make this stuff get hard in a hurry. So between the plasticizer, which slows things down, and the Delvo, which slows things down, and the plasticizer, which reduces the water to cement ratio, we're going to have time, plenty of time, to set the embeds, and then we're going to have lots of strength. When this stuff finally goes off, it's going to be super hard, super strong, and it should be super flat on the top. You can see now why these vents are half blocks, 4 inches wide. This way we can get grout above the vent by blocking off, kind of putting a floor in there with flashing, and we still have room to get the grout below the vent by pumping into the space that's left with half a block sitting on that 8-inch block. It's important that all the cells above and below these vents are full of concrete. Now, grout, as we're referring to it, refers to a concrete mix, also known as block fill. It's a 3/8 aggregate mix. 3/8 is a pretty small rock. It needs to be a small rock so that this mix will penetrate and get into all the little crevices and sills and bond beams inside of these blocks. A bigger rock just wouldn't do it. It would bridge, or it would block and just not run into all the spaces. So block fill, grout, is a hard rock concrete, but the percentage of rock is a little less, the percentage of sand is a little more. It's a compromise between shrinkage and strength and flowability, and with the admixtures and the mix design, this stuff's going everywhere, and it's going to be plenty strong. One other reason that this is a fun pour today, besides the weather and the guys that I'm working with, is the fact that nobody's bending over to finish concrete. We're not down on knee boards, we're not rodding, we're not up and down, we're just standing at workbench height pretty much, striking off the top of a wall and having, if not intellectual, at least enjoyable conversation with our friends as we grout these walls full and don't bend over. And any day you're not bending over pouring concrete is a good day.
It's good, that food mask.
So once the concrete is in place and it's begun to sort of think about taking up just a little bit, I'm gently wet setting or pushing into the still very soft concrete, these anchor bolts, and I'm pushing them down to the predetermined level where I stop the nuts. I put the nuts on there to kind of help float the bolt if the mud is too loose, and also to make a fairly uniform projection. Now these are not perfectly placed. These don't have to be perfectly placed. They just have to be close and somewhere near the call out of 4 foot on center and within 12 inches of the end of a board. Now the vertical rebar that these blocks are embracing, that come up in the cells of these blocks, are tying the wall to the footing and keeping the wall upright, helping to resist it being pushed over by the backfill. But the horizontal bars in this bond beam make the stem wall work like a big beam. It provides tensile strength at the top of the wall and at the bottom of the wall. That enables the wall to support point loads and generally distributed loads, and loads that may show up if some of the soil somewhere settles a little bit, though I don't think it will. But if it does, these bond beams and the height of these walls make these walls very strong in resisting any specific load in any specific place that is either anticipated or unanticipated. These things hold the wall together at the top and at the bottom and reduce or eliminate any cracking or breaking that might happen. So construction's pretty great. It's greater when you start out. I mean, the fun aspect kind of dims over time. It becomes predictable and you learn most of what there is to know about what you're doing, and so the fun element kind of subsides, although it is fun being on a job like this with your friends, doing something where you can talk and visit and use your head and use your strength. And that's good. But from a certain perspective, I wouldn't mind if this was the last block stem wall that I ever grouted, because I have another outlet now that really compels me for the last 10 years or so, and that's blacksmithing. And that may be an artistic outlet or a creative outlet that you'd be interested in or that you've thought about, and we have put together a list of sort of entry-level blacksmith tools and some ideas about where you could go to get them, and some ideas about what you might have to spend to get set up with a pretty solid and pretty versatile and pretty permanent set of blacksmithing tools that you could use to dive into that craft if that was something that was compelling to you. And I can tell you it's compelling to me. So if you're interested in that tool list, check that out in the notes to the video, because we have that and we're offering it for free to those of you who may be interested in that. So in any case, craftsmanship is awesome. Work is awesome. Being productive is key to being happy in your life. And I hope that you can find a way to embrace some of these things in your life and get the fulfillment that comes from making things and producing things.
It's the other latch. Yeah. It's the latch.
This little section of short blocks, what I mean by that is only 2 blocks high, is in the garage door opening. And so it's lower than every place else in this foundation because we're going to be driving in and out here. And it's low because the garage floor is going to be poured over the top of this little segment, probably 6 inches thick at this point. So it's only 2 blocks high, it's not very long, there's not much grout that goes in here, but there is a bond beam in it, and it's important that it be grouted because we're going to be driving the forklift in and out over the top of this little short stub wall for weeks, perhaps a couple of months as the house is framed. And it's got to be strong or stronger than any other part of this foundation. And we will be tying it to the floor that we pour later so that the floor and this little bit of stem wall is all working together to make the entrance to this garage stable and flat and immovable from now on. Well, the admixtures that I put in this batch cost me an additional, let me guess here, probably $500. I'm not sure it's that much, but let me just say this. I'm sure glad I put them in there because this is a nice warm summer morning. And these blocks are dry and they're hot. And if I would not have plasticized this mix up, I would not have been able to successfully grout this pour with grout that's going to get as hard as this stuff is. I would have added, I would say, 40 gallons of water between these 2 loads from the time that the trucks got here until the time that they left, and that would make a very wet, very low strength block fill. But as it is, I didn't add any water, and this stuff stayed very workable for the entire duration, which is about, I would say, maybe 40 minutes from beginning to pump until finally having the wall struck off. Now these last few bolts that I'm setting are right at the end of that 40 or 50 minute window. And this fill is beginning to get a little hard, and it just makes me smile to think of how well modern chemistry understands and has made easier and friendlier pouring concrete. I'm a believer in plasticizer, and I'm really a believer in a retarder like Delvo. A lot of people are curious about how much a foundation like this costs. And how much a foundation generally costs is like asking how long is a rope. Everyone's different. Every site condition is different. Every engineer has a different set of structural targets that he's shooting for. Every market is different. But if you're interested in what this foundation costs, we make that available to our supporters, and you can go to the notes in the video, in the description of the video, for information on how to get to our website and access all the costs on this project if you're interested. So I always order a little more concrete than I think I'm going to need. This time I've got quite a little more concrete than it turned out that we needed. But I don't mind. We've got a low spot, the walls are grouted, Jeff's got a place to put it, and it will make excellent backfill. Because of the floor design that we're going to use on this house, which is a top flange hanger with the joist hanging down the inside of the stem wall, the plumbing has to be able to come and penetrate the stem wall in order to come up into the exterior wall. That's what these cutouts are about. It gives the plumber room to bring his pipes, waste vent, and water supply into and up into the wall. That presents another layout challenge. These have to come up in the right spot, between studs, not inside windows, not under doors, and in a place where it can access the plumbing, whether it's upstairs or in the ground floor. So there's several of these cutouts that had to be put in. I hope they're in the right place. We made sure that the grout's not filling them up, and the plumber should have no problem making his work happen once we get this deck in. The next video in this series is a brief description of how this foundation is working together as a system. Why the choices about elevation and size and height and rebar were made, and some of the things that I learned from my engineer that were specific to this site that I think maybe are a little counterintuitive and are really useful and might be good for you to know on a project that you might be tackling one of these days. Thank you for watching us grout this wall. Thanks for watching and supporting this series. It's always a gift to me when I realize how many people set aside time in their day to watch Essential Craftsman. Keep up the good work.